Hey, it's Dr. Mitch. We're going to talk about treatment for substance abuse. We're going to spend a lot of time on my favorite treatment, motivational interviewing. I cover this in the very middle of substance use problems, but I want to go into great detail because it's worth knowing because it's going to make your life better. So just trust me on that. This is worth knowing. I'll point out what's on the test. It's all going to be fine. So where did it come from? AA works for lots and lots of folks. Every night there's an AA meeting somewhere, and people who've been sober for over decades are there, really relishing the camaraderie and the community and the love. But some folks, it's just not their thing, right? And then some of the traditional cognitive behavior therapy is actually very effective, but it's not going to help unless you're willing to work it, right? So let's talk about an alternative approach. As you imagine, complete abstinence is a stellar goal. What a wonderful way to live. Drug free for me. But it's not for everybody. And so maybe if we were a little flexible about that, we'd have a better chance of keeping people in treatment. Well, where did motivational interviewing come from? In a sense, it was developed for the in-betweeners and the super resistant. Folks who've got some troubles but don't feel like they're ready for a diagnostic category. Or folks who are just in the thick of it and like really, really troubled and don't even know it, haven't even contemplated it, that kind of thing. They respond really well to this too. Bill Miller developed it because he didn't know what to do. Right? And by starting with the ignorance that he was willing to confess to, he came from this Rogerian tradition. It was all he knew. That's old Carl Rogers right there. And the bottom line was this laid a foundation that he could build from to make motivational interviewing work. All right, well, I'm going to not be able to do justice to Carl Rogers, but the bottom line is he started person-centered therapy. The uniqueness of each individual is the key. You know more about you than I do. So you are the expert. That's what we want to acknowledge from the first second, right? This is part of the humanistic approach. We want to let every person develop to his or her or whatever in between maximum potential, right? Ideally, if you get the chance to honestly see the reality of your own experiences, you're going to move in directions that are consistent with your own values. That's all that it's about. You don't need to write that down. Just understand that it's client-centered, person-centered, focused on your values, not society's, not the therapist's. So how does Rogers do this? He emphasized the client needs to receive unconditional positive regard. What does that mean? That means love the sinner but hate the sin, right? You don't have to agree as the counselor with every person's actions, but if you can find the positive within that person, if you can show that person the honor, the love, if you will, that they deserve just for being a person, it's going to give them the chance to take a look at their own behavior and their own attitudes and change their lives accordingly. Well, so what's it all about? The Rogerian approach is kind of a happy-go-lucky thing, but it wasn't quite enough. People want answers, damn it. Right? So if you're in substance abuse treatment with a Rogerian therapist who doesn't actually do anything but tell you about their positive regard and reflect back what you're saying, you often end up going around in circles. Carl Rogers didn't know it, but folks went back and looked at the tapes of him doing therapy, and he actually was selectively reinforcing people when they started talking about change or when they started talking about picking up on improving their actions so they were more aligned with their own values. So Bill Miller basically noticed that and said, there's definitely something awesome about loving your client, about being with someone and letting them be who they are, independent of what they do. And he thought, this Carl Rogers stuff, it needs a little tweaking. And here, my student Jamie made these slides, but she says, added directive. I mean, he wasn't directive like in a finger wagging, you should go this way. And he certainly wasn't even directive in a finger pointing way. He was just willing to selectively let the person be ambivalent or conflicted about whatever the behavior was, reflect that back to them, but keep supporting the idea that they can do it, that they can make the change, they can be who they are, they can actually behave in ways that are consistent with who they know they are. So motivational interviewing basically combined this. So it's both client-centered and yet it's directive, right? And in part it's because problematic drug use probably isn't what the person wants to do. Now you can see people get manipulative with this, and I saw some book about using it to sell cars and stuff, and that really breaks my heart, right? But the bottom line is, if I direct somebody towards the healthy behavior by their own definition, that's going to make treatment outcome be wonderful. So I'm going to lead the client along these stages of change, which I'm going to get into. Meet the client at whatever stage they are currently in, right? There's no sense in teaching somebody relapse prevention if they don't want to be abstinent, right? Not only does that help the client, it keeps me from burning out as a therapist. Encourage them to move through the stages without much encouragement. I'm not sure what Jamie meant by that. The bottom line is I want to encourage them to move through the stages at their own pace, at the rate they want to use. And these are the stages, right? And you don't have to generate these. If I say what are the stages, you don't have to come up with all the names, but you need to know which one is which, right? Now, is this thing capital T truth? No. Truth be told, every data, the data I've gathered basically suggests people either are ready to change or they're not. But this helps the therapist to know what to do at the time, all right? So pre-contemplation is literally have no intention of changing the behavior, never even thought about it, right? I've got these stoner clients who are tired all the time and they can't figure out why. Maybe it's because they got Epstein-Barr and like you're doing wake and bake, right? They don't know to put it together. They've never thought about decreasing their cannabis use. Couldn't possibly be relevant. They're in pre-contemplation. And if you want to see my paper, Don't Wake and Bake, I'll send it along to you. But bottom line is that's pre-contemplation, not even thinking about it. Contemplation, as the name suggests. They're aware of a problem, but they're weighing the pros and cons. They haven't made any kind of commitment to action. Okay, preparation, or I like to call this determination, right? When they get to the end, they're going to reach the I'm determined to make this happen stage, right? But basically they're prepared. They say, yep, it's time to change, all right? The action stage, literally, they're doing it. They're walking the walk. They're taking steps, right? Maintenance, literally now, I've got the new behavior in order here. I'm making the new operants get emitted, or I'm laying off the ones I wanted to quit. And more importantly, I'm building up some self-efficacy. I'm going to actually say, you know what, I'm starting to get a handle on this. And then lapse, I don't like to call it relapse because that sounds like, I'm all the way down, right? But just lapse, like, whoops. You fall back into old patterns of behavior, right? And Prochaska and DiClemente and those guys have shown a lot of folks don't quit smoking cigarettes till the 5th attempt, the 7th attempt, right? You can always get back on the horse. You mess up one little time, whoops, it's just a lapse. And then you go right back into contemplation. You get yourself prepared again. That could be instantaneous even, as soon as you mess up. And get back into action as quickly as possible. Right? It's a wonderful way to look at your own actions, and it's super helpful for the therapist because you notice, again, if somebody's in pre-contemplation, I'm not going to bother talking about how to change. They haven't even thought about it. Right? The best thing for me to do then, assessment. I'm just going to ask them, gee, how much pot are you smoking? Huh, how early do you have your first indica, right? And then maybe they'll put it together, right? But it's got to be their idea. In contemplation, we're going to do decisional balance. We're literally going to weigh the pros and cons here. And I got to admit, it's a little manipulative, but when they start talking about changing, I go, yeah, tell me all about it. And when they talk about not changing, I go, yeah, whatever, right? Till they're prepared, till they understand they've got a plan and they're intent upon doing it. I usually know they're really ready when they're ready to make a public commitment, when they're ready to tell me and one other person that they're going to do it. That's when I know they're going to go into action. And truth be told, everybody knows tons and tons about how to change a lot of behaviors. So odds are high you get them this far, they already know what to do. You can help them out with maintenance, talking about relapse prevention. If they do have a lapse, you help them frame it so it's not a big catastrophe, and away you go. Now, incidentally, every year somebody quits smoking cigarettes in this class. I didn't get anybody last semester, and I was heartbroken. But if you want to make a public commitment right here underneath the video, or if you just want to email me, please go for it. I've had folks from all the way Turkey, Thailand, everywhere. Go ahead and make the commitment. Cigarettes are really bad for you. I encourage you. I'm happy to coach you along. All right, so recognize these stages if you see them, and you'll do great on the test. All right, so the therapist is going to help folks move through these stages mostly through using these 4 principles. They're going to express empathy. And what do I mean by that? Not sympathy, like, oh, poor you, you're drinking too much, right? But empathy, like, I know kind of feelings sort of like that, right? And it can't be presumptuous, right? Do I know what it's like to be a 20-year-old single mom who's Muslim and smoking crack? Like, I have no clue. But I'm super candid about that, right? I don't pretend like I know what that's like. And lo and behold, I can make the space to say, tell me all about it. Oh, it's frustrating? I know frustration. Oh, your kids drive you nuts? Ooh, I know a bit about that, right? And to just let them know that I can normalize the feelings even if I don't have the exact same experience. The second principle is developing discrepancy. What's going to happen is, as people are talking, they're going to realize that some attitude they have is completely different from the way they're behaving, right? We all do it. We all have discrepancies, right? I know alcohol's a carcinogen, but I still drink alcohol. Right? Ideally, what I will do is really help them elaborate on both sides of that, and then eventually lay it out in front of them in what we'll call a double-sided reflection down the line. But the thing is, we've got behaviors that are inconsistent with our values. Let's let folks really elaborate on that. Part of why this is important is because ambivalence is a part of change. If they weren't conflicted, they would have done it already. And to let folks know that's not that you're not a motivated person or there's something wrong with you. We all have these little contradictions. Some of them are really worth relishing. Some of them are worth changing. Roll with resistance, right? So they're going to pull the, I'm not an alcoholic, right? And then ask me to pick up the rope for a big bout of tug of war. And I'll say, okay, fine. You don't want that label? Fine with me, right? Or they're going to say crazy shit like, Mitch, if you had my kids, you'd drink too, right? And I'm not going to agree with that, but I might say something that just kind of rolls with it. Like, well, alcohol problems can involve the whole family, right? Just to let them know, hey, I hear you. Let's keep rolling. And finally, support self-efficacy as my behavior, as my behaviorist friends say, administer M&Ms immediately, right? Basically, if they say anything like, I think I could do it, I'm going to say, you betcha, right? Tell me more. Let's talk about it, right? So that they start to have a much more reasonable impression of what their capabilities really are. So, what's up with the expressing empathy? Acceptance facilitated change. Literally every study on acceptance, the entire acceptance and commitment therapy literature suggests nobody wants to change if they're not accepted the way they are, right? Reactance theory, all that social psych stuff. My student Melissa's dissertation where we said, okay, you got to quit smoking for 2 weeks. And everybody's like, no, I do not, right? Everybody's a little rebel. But if I say, you don't want to quit smoking pot, don't. Then, okay, they don't have to rebel against that. Skillful reflective listening is fundamental, and we're going to get into this. But all those active listening skills that you might have had beaten into you in some other class, these are key, absolutely key. And we'll go into some depth with those. And ambivalence is normal. All right. Motivation is not a thing that some people have and some people don't. It's going to ebb and flow in different situations and in the presence of different social interactions. What do I mean by develop discrepancy? The client should present the arguments for change, right? If I'm the one saying why they should change, I'm fucking up, right? They should be arguing for change, and I should have my mouth shut, right? Because if I'm trying to talk them into it, what are they going to do? They're going to resist. Instead, I'm going to let them come up with the reasons that matter to them. My old client Thea used to have all these self-harm things. She cut her feet one time and ended up in the hospital, and I was like, Thea, this, hey, my gosh, I mean, well, tell me about the hospital. Because I was hoping to come up with some reasons why she wouldn't want to go there, right? And she said that the showers there, I just hate the showers so much, right? I wouldn't have come up with that in a million years. And then she starts going off on how bad the showers are at the hospital. And now she's got a reason to not cut herself anymore. Right? Change is motivated by a perceived discrepancy between behavior and goals, right? Basically, once you really see this, once you notice that your actions are inconsistent with your values, that creates dissonance. And we know that cognitive dissonance literature, you're going to change one or the other, right? You're either going to start acting differently or you're going to say you don't value that thing anymore. A lot of times that may not be the goal, but hey, whatever floats your boat. And the fact that I'm actually open to it is why it's going to change. So Bill Miller, the guy who made this up, I don't think he'd care. His son loved coke, like snorted cocaine like you would not believe, right? But he couldn't talk to him about it because he couldn't say whatever you decide is okay with me, right? That was his son. He didn't want him snorting coke, right? It's got to be genuine. It's got to be genuine. All right. So how do you roll with the resistance? Definitely avoid arguing for change, right? If they say, I don't want to change, I say, you don't want to change. Don't pick up the rope, right? Let them discover it on their own. Resistance is not directly opposed, right? What does she mean by that? Basically, often it's not all one thing or another. It's a little bit of a whole bunch of things that are kind of getting in the way, or certain barriers to the change that they might not know how to deal with, but they don't even want to say, hey, I don't actually know how to do this, right? But I'm not going to jump in and start making recommendations until they're foaming at the mouth to get it. New perspectives are invited but not imposed. Meaning, I'll literally say, oh, we could get into how some other people have done this if you want. Like, hey, I've got some information if you want, but it's only if you want. Resistance is a signal to respond differently, right? If I catch myself feeling like I'm in a tug of war, then I'm doing something wrong. Right? I'm training the grad students now, and they're like, what should I say? I'm like, shut your mouth. Right? Let them work it out for themselves. Because maybe now's not the time, but maybe if they get to elaborate on the negative consequences, on what they want to do differently, they'll make the decision. All right. So go ahead and write yourself a few questions. Take your 5-minute break, watch some comedy or dance a dance or listen to music, whatever it takes. And we're going to pick it up with Motivational Interviewing 2.